We will be starting with today's session on public speaking.
This call is now being recorded. This call is now taking notes.
So, today we will start with the public speaking classes. So, today we will discuss the art of storytelling, how in public speaking you can master storytelling through your skills. So, we will be starting. So, without any further ado, let's start. So, before I discuss what is the art of storytelling, I want you all to tell me what do you understand by storytelling. Anyone can just unmute themselves. Anyone can just raise their hands and start. Okay, so since no one is telling, so I will start how you can help yourselves through storytelling. So, storytelling is basically the art when you tell a story in your public speaking, when you tell other persons what really storytelling is. So, this is the master weapon. So, imagine that you are standing in front of 500 people, and then you show them just your data, analytics, diagrams, and list. Then they will just look at your phones. They will think that your content is boring. They will think that what you are presenting is not capable. So to make to make that interesting, you tell a story. If you start with data analytics, it will make it boring. But if you start with a story like when I was 14 years old, I made a mistake. This will make them realize this will take them to when they were 14. This, if that story is relatable, they will understand your point of view. And there is a quote said that people will forget what you said, but people will not forget what you did. People will not forget how you make them feel. This is the art of storytelling. This can be used as a master weapon in one's life. So, in today's session, we will first discuss the foundation and neuroscience. Then, we will discuss the five core elements. Then we will discuss the basic five core elements of public speaking. And then we will discuss the improvisation and execution in public speaking. So, how you master your skills? So, we will be discussing in here in this only. So, now demonstrating narrative art. What does this mean? So, basically, this means basically this means that this tells that what's really storytelling is. Storytelling is not merely the recitation of chronological history. It is when you tell people through your experiences. It is when you make them realize through what you felt. So it is the delivery of events framed through an emotional context or purposeful direction. So the dynamic translation. So it takes abstract concepts. What does this mean? So basically, this means that it takes them, it translates them to the real world. It takes them through that. The second point is when you make the complicated data into simple language, when you take just 60 second, even if you tell 60-second, even if you tell a little story about anything, then it will have a greater impact on the audience. Then it will have a much more impact on what the audience has felt. So, the academic definition of what a narrative art basically is that a collaborative process where a speaker uses explicit sensory language, pacing variation, and structural stakes to help you. So, this is basically the academic or basically the main course definition of narrative art, of what basically narrative art is. So, Now we will discuss that why basically is storytelling important, why it is the primary discriminator, why is storytelling the primary discriminator. So the very first point, it breaks the universal breakdown between you and the audience. It breaks the barrier between you and the audience. So when you tell them a story, you make them go through something that you have felt. You make them realize. You make them, you take them to a virtual world from the real world. It makes them look away from your phones. It makes them want to listen you. The second point is defense subversion. So this is basically when you state an opinion, people begin to prepare arguments. They begin to challenge you. They begin to challenge what you said or support what you said. This is basically how you can manage with storytelling with public speaking. The third thing is behavior modification. So basically, data influences thought processes. Temporary narratives change internal identity vectors long term. So what is this trying to say? So basically, this is trying to say that your data, which you present through storytelling, influences what you are trying to say. This influences your long term narratives, what you basically want to say. Now, this is basically how you survive through the economy, through the attention based economy, how you survive through that economy. So the 5 second filtration rule. So the modern audiences switch their attention exactly 5 seconds. If you realize that the modern audience which is near you, they just take 5 seconds. It just takes them 5 seconds to change their attention, to change their point of view. So for one, it is really, really important to make them focused, to make their thoughts and processes in only one arena. So, the very first point, instead of starting openly, instead of starting very casually, like instead of starting very casually, saying, uh, saying hello everyone, today I am here to present this about this and this in front of everyone. Instead of saying that, say anything, say anything that you feel, say anything that you relate to or they relate to. For example, that at precisely 4:12 a.m. the water broke down through the bedroom window. So when you mention such things, where you mention precise, where you mention things precisely, or where you mention things which catches the audience's point of view, then that becomes a main goal for you. Now, we need to build the emotional bridge between you and between the audience. An audience will not connect through you, will not connect with you unless and until they want to, unless and until you make them connect to yourself. So, the mechanism of vulnerability. What does this mean? This means when you share victories, when you share stories, but also you share your struggles, failures, which build an immediate connect. When you share such things which make people want to listen to you, this makes you human, accessible, and worthy of trust. This makes the people to have to trust you. Now, this similarity metric, what does this mean? If the speaker faced the exact same syndrome, for example, you are talking about any emotional speech or you are talking about anything which relates to anyone, like I am talking about public speaking this time. Uh, I think that all of us at one time or any of us at this point of time also must have been suffering with what we must have been suffering with public speaking. We must have been suffering how we can master the art, how we can master the skill of public speaking. If you talk about your experience, if you talk about basically, if you talk about what you want to feel, what you have suffered through, then it will make the audience want to listen to you. This is basically what the similarity metric is. Now, this is basically the point of data. This is basically the data where we can see that the retention level, raw, bulleted text facts only, this only takes up to 10%. And if you take the retention level to come, if you use diagrams of, or if you use any charts, it takes up to 35%. And if you use narratives, then it takes up to almost 62%. So this is basically the narrative, or basically how you can take through it. Now, the next, the persuasion axis. The persuasion axis means that true persuasion requires the optimum balancing. This requires the optimum balancing between your data, between the three sectors. The first is establishing your baseline. The second is the logos, which basically means the structural thing. And the third is pathesis, the emotional resistance engine. And the story integration, which means that you master your structural narrative to capture at three vectors. To capture these three vectors perfectly is basically what the story integration means. Now, this is the first activity which I have brought on for you all. In this, what you have to do is I will drop I will drop a topic in the chat box, and then you have to, form a story out of it, or you have to form anything which you think will drive the others' attention. So, I will give a topic in the chat box. Just give me a second. Please give me a second. Okay, so basically, what your topic, the very first topic for you all, is how I suffered when I was younger. You can talk about any suffer which you have gone through. So I want you all to start with a story. This is a very easy topic in which you can form a story, and even if you can raise their hands, or just unmute themselves and start speaking. Anyone of you, anyone can start speaking. Anyone, please unmute themselves and start speaking. Anyone who wants to start speaking, please unmute yourselves. Please unmute yourselves. Please unmute yourselves. This is just a small activity for you all. Please unmute yourselves. Uh, Please unmute and participate in the activity. Anyone can just unmute yourselves. Please unmute. Okay, so since no one is participating, so I will just speak on the topic myself. So the topic which I gave you all was the suffering which you all went through when you were small. So basically, this talks about any suffering which we have suffered from when we were small. So let me start. When I was 16, I suffered through a major problem of public speaking. This problem was a big problem, as public speaking is the basic skill for each one of us today. So, as I here talked upon how I suffered through public speaking, this may have driven the attention of many others sitting over here. This may have driven many others to, listen to me. This may have driven many others. This may have forced many others to listen to what I am saying. This is what I was talking about, to take up the attention of others, to take up the attention, to make themselves, to make the others listen to what you are saying. Now, the neuroscience, the science behind why this is so important, why am I emphasizing on this? So basically, the bi-directional mind mirroring. When an audience listens to a story which activates their brain, does not this acts like a recitative. This maps their minds to, to this forces them to think upon what you are saying. If the speaker is recounting a physical spirit, the listener's motor cortex frees up. This means that when a speaker is speaking on such thing which is relatable to the others, such which forces the others to think, this describes the crisp apple. The sensory cortex responds, and you are sharing a bond between you and the audience. Now you may think that what am I talking about? What am I basically saying? This is basically the neuroscience, that when you speak something which the others can also relate to, this makes their brain start working. This makes the others want to listen to what you are saying. So, before continuing further, I would like any one of you to just unmute and tell me that anywhere that you have listened, anywhere where you have listened, any TED talk, any powerful speaker's name where they have started with the storytelling and you have been really interested to listen to what they were saying. Anyone who wants to share? Anyone who wants to share? Anyone who wants to share of any of their experiences anywhere where they have felt such things, where they may have felt that their where they have may have felt very, where they have felt very connected to the speaker. Any one of you who wants to share? Anyone can unmute themselves. Anyone, please respond. Please respond, guys. So, since no one is responding, so I will just move further. You may have listened many powerful speakers. I will list a few names, like any TED talk if you have seen, even the online teachers which we may have seen, uh, which we may have seen, like any teachers, any online teachers like Alexa or any Khan sir, which we may have seen. They start with something, that we can relate to, that we will really relate to. Or like, if you are a student going in any grade or in any college, you have been studying with any online teacher, you may have seen, you may have felt the connect which is between you and the teacher. This is what I am talking about. Now, the brain's chemical trait, this strategic story, this acts as an injection this acts as an injection into the audience's blood system. This is a little science, but this is what is basically. Now, the very first thing is that it is triggered by the physical danger or immediate crisis, which means that when you say something very relatable, it triggers the audience's attention, it calms them down on environmental distraction and listen to you. This makes them stop what they are doing, this makes the distraction stop. The very next thing is connection and safety. This is triggered by explicit vulnerability and raw emotion. It eliminates the underlying skepticism. And the third thing, that it is triggered by systematic structural resolution, and it creates a lingering feeling of positive affirmation between you and the audience. Now, the anatomy of high stories. What separates gold from noise? This basically means that when you share a really memorable story, of yourself, this defines that the extreme specificity, the structural anatomy, and the relatability core, which basically means that you make yourself relatable to the audience, you make yourself structurally relatable to the audience, which means that you avoid simple upward transaction and the path must involve massive drops. Now, the filter metric basically says that when the member, if, for example, that you are in the audience and you summarize the point of your story to a friend who wasn't in the room. If no, your story lacks structural focus. This says that, for example, that before going on the stage, you tell your story to any one of your friend, and if that friend is not in the room, if that friend is not there, then you can understand that your story lacks focus, your story lacks what you are basically trying to say. Now, the first element is the character dimension. This talks about that your audience will not care about an event unless and until they drive on experience it. They drive on their experiences. A functional character requires desire vector, which means that it requires one's desire to listen to you. This is the basic first element of storytelling which you require in public speaking. Now, next activity. This is basically a little activity which you all have to do. You all have to, just imagine any story which you all may have in your mind. Imagine that, analyze that story, and prepare a three sentence character setup on that object, on that story. This is a homework for you all which you can do. You can also use an image. I have put it a reference image over here which you can use. Now, the very next thing, element 2, setting spatial geometry. Now, the setting is not a background map. It is a physical engine that exerts structural pressure on your character. It is really important to describe the setting behind your story, to describe how your story looks like, so you can have basically a base of what you are trying to say. So you can have of what basically you are trying to say. Now, here are some examples. The first one, instead of stating that you are in an examination room, say that the synthetic chemical scent of hand sanitizer and the mechanical ticking of the circular plastic clock. This is a little tough, but saying this will drive the audience's attention toward yourself. The second thing, emotional projection. The room should structurally mirror the interior state of the speaker, which means that the setting where you're saying, the setting of the story should define what you are trying to say. The element three is the conflict vector, the engine of interest. If there is no friction in your speech, if there is basically a sheet of paper which you are reading, if basically there is a sheet of thing which you are reading, you won't catch the audience's attention, you won't catch on what you are trying to say. If there is no friction in your voice, and you can't connect, then you sorry, but you can't deliver what you are trying to say. You have to build the conflict vector, you have to build the emotional vector between you and the audience. The element 4 is the structural resolution. Now, never have a story which is resolved by luck. If you won a competition simply because the judges made an error, the narrative will lose its value. Now, if you present something which is done by luck, if you present something which you have not won on yourself, but it is done by luck, the audiences may think that you have never won anything and you're just saying this because made because your luck made good. The resolution doesn't mean that you have a magical happy ending. It means a fundamental internal transformation of the speaker's mindset. You have to make them think what you are thinking. The element 5 is the strategic message, which basically means that when your story is without a alignment, is without a board, is without a body, then your message is not clear, then your narrative is not clear. Your message should have a high impact phrase which is suitable for the audience, which the audience can understand, and you have to deliver in such a way that the audience can understand clearly. Now, activity 3. Now, this is basically what you have to do is you have to work in pairs, but here we can't really work in pairs, so you can work alone also. This is a little sentence and you have to complete this sentence, and you have to say in, you can unmute yourselves and say in such a manner with using all your voice and pitch, using your public speaking skills which we have discussed so far since the past few days. You have to use all those things. Anyone can unmute themselves and start speaking, or we can just leave this activity for yourselves and you can do this as an homework. Now, this is basically a structural blueprint. What this means is distribution of tension across your speech. You may have seen many speakers starting with an expectation, they set up a baseline, then they move on with the climax, and then they come to the resolution. For example, any prize distribution, if you may have seen, they build a climax and then they give the resolution. This is what you have to develop in your storytelling power. You have to develop it in such a way that you build a climax and then you give the solution. Now, the first 30 seconds which you use is basically the hook, is basically the base of what you are saying. You have to drop the listeners directly into the center of action. You have to avoid introductions or greetings. Start with the center of action and avoid introductions. Then you can also start by asking a question that breaks the standard cognitive model, forcing your brain to look for the structural resolution. Now, the middle is the tension engineering. This basically means creating tension in the middle instead of continuously saying that bores the others, that does not makes the others to think, can become exhausting, can become boring. Your story must have a emotional, your story must have an emotion connect between you and the audience. Now the end should have an impact, should have a solution. Now when you started with a story, or you may have started with a problem, and then you brought to the climax, and now at the end you have to give the solution. You have to return where you started you have to return where you started and give the solution to it. Or if you're talking about any problem, for example, you're talking about global warming. In the starting, you started with your own story about how you suffered, how your family suffered because of global warming, or any example of anyone, how the earth is suffering with the global problem. Then you brought it to the climax, and at the end, you have to give a solution. You have to give a call to identify the problem. Now, here, what you have to do, this activity is to shift your vocal metrics. Now basically, this is a sentence and you have to form out a story out of it, but due to less participants and a little less on a little lack of time, we will just move a little further. Now, basically, the first genre is the personal experiences. The personal stories hold basically a lot of memories, hold a lot of value because they cannot be fact checked, or they cannot be argued by others, because that is what you have suffered with, because that is what you have gone through. Now, a basic rule is never use a personal story just to showcase how incredible you are, just to showcase yourself, to make yourself stand out, to make yourself the center of attraction. This may lead to negative consequences than what you are thinking. The gender 2 is the inspirational framework is using, do not, inspirational stories do not rely on high volume delivery, they rely on the calculated management on overcoming heavy odds, which basically means that inspirational stories do not basically rely on high volume delivery, they rely on the calculative management, they rely on how you manage those stories, how you deliver those stories to the audience. The genre 3 is the humorous one. If you use your humor, if you make the audience laugh, if you make your humor to connect between the audience, that would be really great. Now, a point, never tell jokes which targeted someone, which targets anyone else. Share stories about your own self, about your own absolute clumsiness to make yourself instantly accessible, to make the audiences think that you are accessible, to make the audiences think that you are ready to share, you are ready to make them listen to. The very next thing is the genre 4, the historical narrative. Now, when explaining about an strategical blueprint, or when explaining any logical historical thing, make yourself, make your voice weighted, make the story a little weighted. For example, in 1943, an asthmatic teenager sat locked in London bunker. So you highlight your voice when you're telling a story, when you're telling something, or not only just telling makes it thing, but your voice, your pitch, how you deliver it makes a big difference. Use the commas, make your voice emphasis, and if you combine all of them that we discussed in the past few days, you will be good to go. The genre 5 is the hypothetical scenario. When your solution doesn't exist yet, you must build a simulation chamber for your audience, which means that build a scenario, build something which makes them imagine, which makes them away from the real world to their own world, to their own thinking. This is basically what the genre 5 talks about. For example, imagine waking up tomorrow morning, checking your terminal, and finding out your core code module has automated your entire current workload. This use such situations which takes them away from the very real world. Another activity. This is basically where you have to uh, you where you have to just use your own mind, and you have to pick up any three unrelated words, and then you have to make out a story out of it, and you have to speak about it about for about a minute. You can do that right now, or just take it up as a homework. You can just drop your opinion in the chat box. How you all feel, how you all want to go through it. You all will drop your opinion in the chat box. We can take this as a homework. Okay, so I think we can take this as a homework. Now, the very next thing is the strategic matrix. What does this mean? Is the first thing is the data dump transition. Instead of just dumping your transition in front of others, instead of just telling your data in front of others, synchronize that data into characters, synchronize them into real world, use example from the real world which makes them connect. The second thing is the climax. Before revealing the solution or the resolution which you have made, use your voice volume, use your pitch with the turning point, force the audience to think upon that what your resolution will be. The very biggest example is the prize distributions that just basically happen in our colleges, in the TVs, in the schools. The very next thing is with the chronological trap. Now start with your very own old story. Start with your chronological thing. Now, what you have to do is you don't have to explain it very long. You have to explain it in the scripts in a short manner so that the listener does not get much bored. The very next thing is the unearned resolution. Now, fixing a high level crisis with help of luck or any unexplainable external elements, fixing any level crisis, which is not basically a workable solution, but you have fixed that through luck or you have fixed that through any external elements, will make the audience think that you do not have a solution, or you do not have much thinking so that you can think about it. So avoid this. Now, this is basically where job interviews, this is basically where your public speaking and your storytelling helps in any job interview. Now, when an interviewer asks you an outline of your experience, they ask you how you have improvised. Do not just, explain it in a very simple way. Use your creativity, use your storytelling power. The STAR method is the situation, task, action, result. The situation is first define your background in the first 20 seconds, then state the exact personal ownership goal, and the action is to detail the steps you took and then highlight the result. This is basically a timeline which you can use speaking in front of a larger audience in any interview or anywhere. The interviewer, they aren't just evaluating your technical skills, they are tracking how you have used your structural clarity under direct psychological. Now, the leadership. True leadership communication requires a shift from your personal metrics to creative vision board. Now, what you have to do is frame your current organization hurdles as critical rising action phase, which means that you help your team see that current stress vectors are standard, which means that you do not have to just mention yourself, you do not have to just make yourself, you have to make your organization as we shift your personal metrics from to a collective vision, to a vision of all. Now, the next thing is the conversational networking hooks, which means instead of just asking, or instead of just telling directly, if someone asks, what do you do? Just do not answer directly. Answer with help of your skills, answer with help of your voice, bridge the gap between you and the audience, fill the curiosity gap between you and the audience. Another little activity, the personal activity which you can do is What you have to do, you have 60 seconds. Since we have a little less participants and this is a group activity, what you have to do is you will make a group of a few people, and then you have to deliver basically on your on any topic which I will tell you. Your performance must clearly highlight the exact lesson which you have learned and how you have to do. Another take it as a homework. Now we move on with the case studies. How big people, how many, people which we may know have set up their public speaking. First, Steve Jobs. When in the launch of iPhone, this iPhone is a masterpiece. His in his speech, if anyone has observed how he delivers his iPhone launch, he spends the first opening 10 minutes to establish friction, to establish the problems, to establish the existing friction caused by the existing smartphones. And then he reveals the solution that he has done in the iPhone. You can take many motivational speakers, how they use their speeches to have. Now, this you can take the screenshot of this worksheet. This is basically a small worksheet where you have to tell your own, where you have to think upon your own, where you have the crisis, the how you set it up, your solution, how you transformed, and how the result was. A storytelling activity which will help you build your public speaking through storytelling. Now, if you see others, when you evaluate peers' narrative delivery, which means that when you evaluate others, you may have seen how they deliver, how they have their framework, how they have their critique. When the conflict clear and streak set high enough within opening 10 seconds, did you feel genuine tension? This means imagine any other person speaking, you may have observed that when the conflict is clear and when the speaker has set high goals with the first opening 20 seconds, you may have felt genuine tension, you may have felt genuinely to listen to the speaker. This is what you have to build. And again, this will only come through practice. Take up any topic, anything from anywhere, and then you will be good to go. And this is where the session comes to this is where the session comes to the end. And before winding up, I would just like to say that to have your public speaking, to deliver your public speaking, it is really important to practice. It is really important for one to go through various stories. You can watch any TED talks. We have already built the voice page. We have already built us we have already taken out a fear. Now we have to work through the storytelling. Here I have told you the psychological science behind storytelling. I have told you, I have given you many examples where you can, how you can go through public speaking. That was all what I had brought to. Now I would like to hand it over to ma'am. So this was all from our side from Nyaya Shiksha Trust for the for another day of public speaking classes. We will meet again